Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 7th, Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. We convened at 5:15 for an executive session. And at that time, I asked the town manager whether the meeting was properly warned, and he said it was. Is that still true?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. That's so great. Our first order of business tonight is to approve the minutes from April 25th. Is there a motion? Oh, wow. Competing motions. I'm going to go with Richard Davis. Clerk. Richard.
I move to accept the minutes as presented.
Thanks so much. Richard's made a motion to accept the minutes of April 25th as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 5-0. Next order of business is chair's remarks. That continues to creep up on me very quickly. I want to say thank you to Elizabeth for chairing the last two select board meetings. I was out of town for a death in the family, unfortunately, and then was sick as a dog on my return. So I am happy to be back here, and I really do appreciate how you ran those meetings. I watched them on video and yelled at the screen a lot. It was great. I want to say a couple of things about this last weekend. We had the first gallery walk of the year on Friday, and it was like a wonderful occasion where the community shook off its winter drabness and went out into the streets and did all kinds of interesting things, one of which is a new mosaic that's being proposed for Pliny Park. And they had a fun activity where you got to smash bits of pottery, which is a good stress reliever. I also want to thank John Potter, our esteemed town manager, for all of the work that he did in preparing for and convening the event that we did with Jim Baker at Landmark College. No, SIT. Sorry. Whoops. The other week, it was a meeting where we had numerous community partners, and it was a really powerful day that I hope that in our select board retreat, we'll get to talk about what our next steps are. So thank you, John, for all the work that you did in preparation for that, and also the lovely opening remarks that you made. And other than that, I want to kind of remind my fellow board members that I'm still pretty new to this chairing malarkey. I'm going to be looking for hands raised. It helps me see who wants to speak, and it also helps the public see who wants to speak as well. So if you could help me out with that, that would be wonderful. And with that, I will pass it on to John for manager's comments.
Thanks, Daniel. I've a number of things tonight to update everybody on. First of all, the town will be using OpenGov, the new financial software that the town purchased last year, for the next utility billing cycle in July. There are a couple of improvements that utility users will see with this change. First, online access to your utility bill. Second, you'll be able to pay your utility bill through the customer portal online with a credit card. And you'll be able to get a copy of that bill emailed to you if you supply us with an email address. And fourth, over time, you'll be able to see and track consumption of your water utility period over period. So that seems like a pretty good benefit coming out of that OpenGov transition that we are in the middle of. And town staff will keep everyone posted as we get closer to July about how to access all that. Dog licenses are still available right at the town clerk's office and online through the town website, brattleboro.org. After June 4th, owners of unlicensed dogs may get fined up to $100. So please be cognizant of that if you have not yet licensed your dog. People can request August state primary absentee ballots through their My Voter page or by calling, visiting, or emailing the town clerk's office. Appreciate Daniel's comments regarding the symposium that was held last week. I also wanted to thank Jim Baker and Sue Graff for the planning and organization of that public safety and public health symposium that they held. And a general thank you to all the state agency people that came down for that event here in Brattleboro. Also wanted to thank Chief Hardy for the work she did moderating a panel at the symposium, Knowles Wentworth for a really great talk that he gave, and all the other moderators, panelists, and participants in that event. I expect the board will be talking about that in your retreat and possibly at an upcoming agenda as well. The town holds its first town committee fair on Wednesday, May 29th at 6 p.m. at the Brooks Memorial Library. Representatives from town committees will be available at this session to discuss their work with the public. Applications and kiosks will be available for people to apply for committees that they're interested in. So please come out and check out this amazing all the amazing committees and all the wonderful volunteers that serve town government in this way. And you know, maybe hopefully get inspired yourself for giving back to the town. If you're interested in helping with the fair or would like to represent one of the committees or have any questions, please contact Jessica Stickler in the town manager's office or at jstickler@brattleboro.gov. The town idea committee will be holding a Black Artists Showcase at the Municipal Center during the week of Juneteenth, June 14 to 19th. The committee is currently seeking interested artists to display their work. Anyone interested in this event should contact the Human Resources Department at juneteenth@brattleboro.gov. Finally, the town really wants to hear from people about potential changes to the trash, recycling, and compost programs in an online survey. This is on brattleboro.gov, and a print version is also available at the Municipal Center and the town manager's office, at the Brooks Memorial Library, and at the Brattleboro Senior Center. Completed surveys can be dropped off at those locations or done online. The deadline for getting included in feedback to come back to the select board is May 17th at noon. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, John. Select board comments and or committee reports. Elizabeth?
I just have a question about the committee fair. That will it be warned as a public select board meeting so that more than 2 select board members can go if they choose to?
We were not planning to warn it as a select board meeting, but I believe under the open meeting law, if you were attending it and not having conversations or making decisions, that all 5 of you could attend it. Yep.
I have a question.
Great.
Just for John, will eventually OpenGov allow all Brattleboro residents to use a credit card for all the bills they have to pay the town?
We are working on that. That would be a goal. Also to have that available in potentially in the municipal center as well for people coming into the office. So yes, Kim Frost, our finance director, has been working very hard on those kind of improvements. So
Thanks, John. Other select board comments or committee reports? France?
Thank you, Dan. So some of you know that on Wednesdays and Fridays for the past year or so, I've been setting myself up at the Works downtown. Wednesday afternoon from 4:30 to 6:30, Friday morning from 8 to 10, and calling that my office hours so that people can come and talk to me about anything that's on their mind with regards to town affairs. So for the first time, I'm not going to be there either on Friday this week or on Wednesday or Friday next week. So folks, please don't show up, or if you do show up, have a cup of coffee, but you won't get to talk to me. I still want to talk to people. And if there's something pressing, please get in touch with me by email or by phone. And I'll look forward to the resumption of office hours the week after next. Let me also say what I want to talk about at office hours the week after next, or tomorrow, if you come tomorrow. And that is the community safety event that we had at SIT, which people have already referred to, which was excellent and is a new opening for us to discuss all this. So I'm really very hopeful that people will come and talk to me, and also let the rest of the board know what they're thinking on the subjects of what it means to be safe in Brattleboro and how the town government can contribute to that. So I'm really looking forward to those conversations going forward. We held off on that for a number of months, really since the end of last summer. We've been kind of delaying on that, waiting for this turn of events to reach where we are now. But now that we've reopened the conversation, I really do hope people will be very vocal in their thinking. So
Thank you, Franz. Other select board members with comments? Elizabeth?
I just want to remind everyone that France doesn't have the only avenue to discussing with the public, and that we're all available to you, and you can find our email and our phone numbers on the town website and get in touch with us if you choose.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, so moving on to public participation. This is part of the meeting where the public may speak on an item that's not on the agenda. And I see a hand in the room and a hand on Zoom. I will go with a hand in the room first of all. Please come to the microphone, introduce yourself, and you can have up to 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Ricky Rosati, and
Oh, I'm sorry, Ricky. John just whispered to me something very important to remind me that if there was something on the consent agenda that you would like to see pulled, this would be an appropriate time to mention that.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
But my name is Ricky Rosati, and
Ricky.
I'm currently serving on the agricultural committee. I'll be at the committee fair as well. And I have been working on a proposal for a couple of years about poison ivy removal along the Hinsdale to Brattleboro walkway that I have been asking for support with through both non-municipal organizations, but also municipal committees in both Hinsdale and Brattleboro and the select board. I have a little letter explaining more about that, about how that area is a flood zone, and to help prevent the soil erosion there, we could really invest more into sustainable landscaping there. The poison ivy there is really dangerous. Not just me and my dog have gotten rashes there, but the vines also ripped his dew claw, which was not just like almost $300 surgery to recover from, but it was just like really painful for him too. He couldn't walk for a couple of days. And then that area is the construction zone for the new bridge, where they used a rodent side, which increased the tick population there. And so he also got a tick-borne illness there, where he also couldn't walk again for a couple of days until we could see the vet and get a medication, which thankfully helped. And so that area is owned technically by the municipality of Hinsdale, and we would really appreciate, because that area is going to have increased pedestrian traffic since it's being closed to cars, to make it more accommodating. There are over 30 New Hampshire licensed herbicide contractors, and Newfoundland Landscaping was the only business that got back to me with a RFB, and that was for $975, and they filled out the permit that would be required to, which I sent to everybody involved to look at in advance, which there are a lot of details too, but basically some of the main highlights of it would be that he's proposing using a product called Southern Speed Zone, 2 applications, which would have that area be just the green area there, where if you're walking towards Tyndale, the left-hand side, to be taped off for 4 days total, so 2-day intervals. So there would be a couple months apart too. So just like 4 days over that season, we could get rid of the poison ivy, but
If you could start to wrap it up, Ricky.
but we would also have to invest in contracting with permaculturists to install hopefully native plants there with deep root systems to prevent more of the soil erosion in the flood zone.
Thanks, Ricky.
Are there any questions, any comments?
As you know, we don't really get into substantive conversation about items at this point in the meeting. We did receive your email with your request. We have asked Patrick to reach out again to the town of Hinsdale because, as you point out, this is their property. And so I believe, Patrick, you were going to do that this week.
I did.
Thank you, Patrick. So we'll see what happens there.
I look forward to hearing about how that conversation went and what we can do. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. I see a hand on Zoom, and I think it's David Levenbach.
It is. Thank you, David Levenbach, District 9. I would implore the town, as it works with Casella, to maintain a robust recycling and composting program as we go forward with new waste removal. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Other public comments about things not on the agenda from folks in the room or on Zoom? Okay, seeing none, we shall move on to the consent agenda. John, could you just give us a brief summary of what's on the consent agenda tonight?
Sure thing, Daniel. There are 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. If you approve this agenda, you will be approving a tobacco license for the Super 8 convenience store at 1020 Western Ave. You'll be approving a parade permit for the AIDS Walk fundraiser on May 25th, which will go from the Center Congregational Church to the co-op and back along sidewalks. And you will be approving the 2023 Financial Management Questionnaire and Municipal Checklist for internal controls required by state statute each year.
Thank you, John. Okay, board, someone want to make a motion?
I'll motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you so much, Peter. Peter has made that motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0, that passes, and we shall move on to old business. The first and only item of old business is the SEVCA Board of Directors Brattleboro appointments. And I guess before we discuss this, I just want to disclose that that is my employer. I do not report directly to the Board of Directors. That is much more the leadership of the organization, executive director. I am a lowly middle manager and email and spreadsheet monkey. So John, anything you want to say about this item?
Well, just that we received this request from SEVCA to appoint Mr. Kevin Kennedy and Mr. John Couleur as public representatives on their board of directors as representing the public sector.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item, board? Franz?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Well, I think those of us on the board certainly remember that this was on the consent agenda at our last meeting, and I asked that it be removed from the consent agenda. And I want to say why I did that. And I don't object to it at all. But there's some wording problems with it that led me to be confused about just what this appointment is. And the way that it came up is unusual. So that's why I thought we should have a chance to hear a little more about it. The letters that we received recommending Mr. Couleur and Mr. Kennedy as representatives on this board, at one point says that they will be appointed as the Brattleboro Selectboard representative. And elsewhere in the cover letter, it says specifically that there are no Brattleboro representatives, that in fact, these are public representatives that are required in whatever the charter is by which SEVCA exists. And that in fact, they've already been appointed to the board, but they need to have that approved by some public body in order for them to meet the criteria that they have to meet with regard to public representation. So things are just a little, I was definitely confused about, well, these are our people on their board, and if so, what are we expecting them to do there? That's not really the case. What they're really asking is for us to say, you have our blessing to put these people on your board as public representatives, and we think that they'll do a good job of that. But they are not, in fact, Brattleboro's representatives, certainly not the select board's representatives. And I think we should go ahead and approve it because it's a great organization and these people seem to be perfectly qualified to serve on their board.
Thanks, Franz. I didn't ask anybody for a motion, but I wonder if someone would like to make one. And then I would like to inquire as to whether there's somebody from SEVCA in the meeting that would like to speak briefly on the matter. Somebody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make the
Go ahead,
motion.
Franz.
I move that we appoint Mr. Kevin Kennedy and Mr. John Cooler as public representatives for Southeastern Vermont Community Action (SEVCA) Board of Directors.
Thanks so much. Is there a representative from SEVCA here to speak, perhaps on Zoom? If so, they could raise their hand in Zoom and make themselves known. Does not seem so. Board, is there any further discussion on the motion? Elizabeth?
Perfectly in favor of this. It seems like SEVCA has appointed these representatives because they live in Brattleboro, and there are other representatives on the board who live in other towns, and other towns are approving them. So I'm perfectly happy with putting our stamp of approval on these applicants.
Wonderful. Okay. Any discussion from the public? Okay, seeing none. Then I would go with the following motion Franz made just before to appoint Kevin Kennedy and John Cooler to the Southeastern Vermont Community Action (SEVCA) Board of Directors. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 5-0. And we shall move on to new business. Item A, which is a Charter Review Commission update. We have some representatives from the Charter Review Commission here. And perhaps they can join us at the very beautiful presenters table that has one too few chairs.
Arithmetic is not your forte, apparently.
It truly is, but I had nothing to do with the chair. Okay, and Kate, are you going to be presenting to us?
Well, we're doing it as
Do a little
group.
some
Yeah.
introductions.
We'll make it short and sweet. for
Very
you.
good.
My name is Kate O'Connor, and I'm the Chair of the Charter Revision Commission. And with me tonight is Peter Elwell and Denise Glover, two other board members. And really what we wanted to come and talk to you folks, give you a quick update. We want to make sure you know what's going on, and we want to make sure the public knows what's going on because we need the public's participation in this process. And as a short recap, at least every 15 years, the town charter has to be reviewed. The select board, gosh, it was like December 22 or something, appointed our group, 7 people, and we've been working on the charter ever since. And I know people were here in October and gave you an update of what we had been doing then. So I sort of want to talk about what we've been doing since October and really more focus on what we're going to be doing because we really need the public to take part. We've had a really good discussion about representative town meeting and whether we should have a representative form or go to an open town meeting. We haven't made any decisions. I'll just say this right now, so nobody has to worry. We haven't made any decisions. And we did that in February. And our plan is for May, with the May meeting, which is May 16th, which is next week, we're going to continue our discussion on RTM and talk about more of the procedures. And then some of the things, you know, like do you stand, do you raise your hand, and those kind of procedures. But then some more in-depth things of the districts, how people represent right now we have districts that overlay with the legislative districts. We've had some people come in and say, maybe we should do it by neighborhoods. Maybe we shouldn't do it by the legislative district. So we're going to have that kind of a conversation. We're also going to talk about things like a line item veto of the budget, which doesn't exist as of yet, or as of now. And how people get on the ballot to be a town meeting member, whether there should be signatures or not. So there's a lot of topics that are going to go into on Thursday night. And we'd really encourage the public to come, whether you're an RTM member or not, because it's, the basis of our form of government. In June, on June 20th, we're going to talk about the RTM committees, Finance Committee and Human Services Committee, and see if there's a way to refine, if there's any more information or that we can put in the charter to really better identify or define what they are. We're also going to talk about the Capital Grants Review Board, which I know came up at one of your select board meetings. It's sort of nobody knows what it does or if it needs to exist. So we're going to talk about that. And then in July, I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion about work that Peter and Denise and Joy Turneau, who's on their subcommittee, are doing about looking at other charters in other towns. And I'll let Peter and Denise sort of talk about what they're going to do, because it could be a very interesting discussion for all of us.
Thanks, Kate. Before I do that, I'd like to just reiterate Kate's call for public participation in our process. We've had some of that, but not as much as we would hope for. So we're hoping that the exposure this evening might bring in more public participation, and particularly on this question of representative town meeting versus open town meeting and some of the particulars of what the authority is at town meeting. We think it's really important that we hear any ideas that anyone has to share and have the public participating in that consideration. Kate mentioned that 3 of us on the commission are reviewing the charters of other municipalities in Vermont. A quick footnote so as not to go too deep into the rabbit hole, but it's interesting that under Vermont statutes, there are some organizations that in other states would be special districts, and there would be a whole separate statutory basis on which they are created and function. But in Vermont, those special districts actually function also as municipalities. And so some of the other charters are for things like solid waste districts or fire water districts. And so some of that review isn't going to be as useful to us, but we're still looking at each one of those. And then there are dozens of other municipalities that are in fact what you would think of as a municipality, a city, town, or village. There's 252 in Vermont, and about a fifth have a charter that gives them particular authority granted by the state above and beyond, or in addition to the what's set out for all the municipalities and state statutes. We're interested in knowing what is in each one of those so that we can draw good ideas that have been operating in other places and bring them into the discussion for the Brattleboro Charter. And so we've made a little bit slower progress on that. I think probably when we were here the last time, we told you that we were excited to be undertaking this particular piece of work, and we were. We now have sort of doubled down on it. We are actively in the work and looking forward to the July meeting when we will be presenting what we've learned.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Kate,
Yeah,
Denise gonna chime in as well?
what he said.
Nice. Very good.
And one thing that we haven't figured it out yet, but we're soon going to figure it out. I'm hoping at probably not the next meeting, but coming up, is what our time frame is, because this obviously can't go on forever.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want it to go on forever. And there's a process after we get our work done. We'll have it eventually has to go to town meeting to be either they agree with us or they don't. And in between, we'll have public information meetings as well. And then it has to go to the Vermont legislature. They have to approve it. So we're not going to be, the whole process won't be done next week at the rate we're going, because you have to get into the legislature and everything. It could be, I don't want to say when, but 2000, 25, or 26, we don't want to go past election day in 2026.
Our work certainly won't.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Our
Right.
work will be
We want it to
done.
be in the legislature in the next biennium.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we want to get ours done sooner because we're going to be coming to you folks and asking you to warn a special town meeting for that the rate is going next year. But we do want to encourage everybody to take part, whether it's at our meetings or whether when we have our informational meetings. But you can take part by Zoom or in person.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Denise. Select board members, any clarifying questions about this or comments? Elizabeth?
I just want to thank you all for your service.
Other board members? France?
I'd be curious as to whether there's anything you want from the select board above and beyond, you know, what you've either already mentioned or just our participation as citizens of the town. Is there any way that we can be helpful?
Well, we are going to be having a discussion about the select board, which was, I think, Franz, you were at the meeting. Your former chair had some thoughts about maybe they weren't radical changes, but he had some ideas about maybe the role of the select board, how it's outlined in the charter. So we will be asking you folks what your thoughts on those are. We haven't discussed it yet, so I don't have any more information besides what Ian Goodnow mentioned to us. But that's one thing specific to the select board that you can be helpful to.
And do you know when that might happen?
No, but I will make sure you know in advance.
Great. Thank you. I wonder, I do recall there was an email to town meeting members about the last time you all discussed town meeting. Can that happen again, please?
It is being drafted by me. And I'm
Wonderful.
hopefully going to get it to Patrick, who by the way has been super helpful to us. Patrick is our staff person who we couldn't do it without. Yes, it's being drafted by me and Patrick is going to send it out soon once he gets it.
Great. And then I wonder if you could speak to line item veto and explain what that means.
Yeah, if you notice now, anybody at RTM who goes will notice that the town meeting members can't say we don't like that thing and have it scratched out. You know, you either vote the budget down, you approve it or you vote it down, or you make a recommendation to the select board that we want to put money in or what there. It's unknown, and I can speak to my own personal knowledge of this. It's really not written anywhere that you can't line item veto anything, you know what I mean, or take it out. It's sort of been a practice, and I can say my father, who was town moderator for 22 years, and maybe even Peter's father as town manager, but I think more my father at the time. And he got it probably from the previous town moderator. It was just a practice that was it's, you know, it's like, this is the way it is. You can't deal with one line item in the budget. So there's not written anywhere that that's the way you do it or that's the way you don't do it. So I think it came up and we wanted to sort of have a discussion on, do we have to clarify that in some way?
Bob Fisher, town attorney, has been also very helpful to us. He's attended most of our meetings. And obviously the essence of the work that we're doing is about the law as it relates to municipal operations. And so his advice has been important to us. And if he were here tonight, I think what Bob would say, but I want to have a big asterisk on this, that it's what I think Bob would say, is that there is some case law that applies. So while there's nothing in statute that says it explicitly, clearly, that you can't eliminate a particular thing from the budget, I think it is what you said about what moderators have said consistently over many years. And I also think that they're saying that based on the advice that town attorneys have given. I certainly know that's the advice that Bob has given. And I've heard him say, I think many of you have heard him say, that in those moments, the leverage that RTM has is if it's very clear in its action that, let's say it's a $22 million budget and there's a $100,000 cut occurring. The motion is to cut $100,000 out of the budget because we don't like this $100,000 thing. And we want the select board not to proceed with this. That under the law, as it's been interpreted up until now, RTM can't actually remove that item from the budget. But I think the way Bob has described it over the years is, woe unto the select board that just disregards RTM's advice.
Mhm. Thank
And a
you.
lot of what the work we're doing is to clarify things that we all sit at town meeting going, what does that mean?
Yep, that's greatly appreciated. Elizabeth, you had a question?
Well, the subject came up actually in our last select board meeting and also at RTM that it was frustrating for RTM members. They don't have more say in the budget. And the suggestion was made several times that we at the select board have so many meetings about the budget, and more representation or more participation from RTM members would be the way to go. I also note that on the national level, Congress makes the budget and the president does not have line item veto.
Interesting. Thank you, Elizabeth. Ron's?
Most folks probably have heard of Pandora's box, but not as many people realize that Pandora also had a budget. And I think the story goes that Pandora opened her budget to line item vetoes. And after that, town meeting never ended. So I'd be careful with that.
And just, I want to clarify something too, is none of us so far are advocating for anything.
Right.
What we've been doing as a commission at this point is going through the charter and saying, here's all these things, let's see what we should be looking at. And not with an agenda to do one thing or the other. And then we have had some public participation, not as much as we wanted. But some of the things that we're talking about came directly from the public saying, we think this. We really have, and we're going to get better at it. We really haven't sat down and made any big giant decisions yet. But we know that's coming, and that's when.
Barely made small decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. We spent the first year literally just collecting information, and we've spent the last 4 or 5 months, working with that information, but not trying to rush the decision making, trying to make sure that we're sort of agreeing on what we've got and agreeing that it's what we need in order to have the substantive consideration and start making some decisions. We're not quite there yet.
And
Thank
just,
you.
You do open Pandora's box. You talk about one thing, then you're like, oh, that thing is layered upon something else. So that's kind of where what we encounter almost at every meeting. So.
Thank you. Members of the public with questions or comments for the commission, I'll come back to the board in a second. Yep. You want to come to the microphone, introduce yourself, and fire away.
Fritz Party, District 3, town meeting rep, energy committee member. I come with several hats. I wanted to make sure you guys got the energy committee's submission.
Yes, we did.
And I'd like to find out if there's ever a meeting where that would be appropriately discussed. You would let us know.
We will definitely let you know.
Okay. And with my citizen hat on, I was wondering if you were coming to this work with the charter as it is, as the basis, and then considering changes from there, or if you're starting from scratch.
Like writing our own entire new charter?
Yes.
No, we're looking at the charter that we have.
And tweaking it.
And yes.
Okay.
A little more than tweaking, though.
Yeah.
If I might, I would say both and. So we're not trying to write a charter from scratch because we have a charter and parts of it are working just fine.
Okay.
But we're doing more than just looking at the existing charter and tweaking pieces we think could be improved. Part of the reason the work is slow and steady is because of the way in which we're asking for people to bring us ideas and generating ideas of our own to consider things that aren't in the charter at this time, but maybe ought to be.
Yeah, I was involved in the previous charter review, and I think people ran out of patience towards the end, but there was an attempt to get the right of recall in there to make sure all of our town officials were, truly accountable during their terms. And not that I've seen a situation where that would be applicable in my experience, but it seemed like a good thing to have in there. And as far as RTM goes, I've made no secret that I am a big fan of RTM as it is. And I think it's a fantastic example of democracy at work.
Thanks, Fred.
On another front, I want to appreciate the fact that you disclosed the fact you worked for SEVCA. And I anticipated that meant that you would kind of recuse yourself there. But
No, I didn't, because I don't have any relationship to the board of directors, but thank you.
appearances might have dictated that anyway.
Thank you for your feedback.
Ask you guys to consider that sort of thing in the future.
Yep, thank you. Other members of the public with questions or comments for these brave commissioners? Seeing none, I think, Franz, you had maybe one more question? Then we'll move on.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Getting super nerdy here. I think it's not quite true that representative town meeting cannot reach into budgets and make changes in line items under the current rules as I understand them. Rather, some of the motions at town meeting have specific numbers, budget items in them. And anything that's in the motion, anything that where that's what we're talking about, then somebody could say, I want to amend that number. It's when there's only one single big number, like in the general fund budget, you can't reach into that number. You can only change the number that's in the motion. So any of the articles that come up that have a breakdown by different items within that article, those numbers could be changed by town meeting. So it's kind of a structural or procedural matter as to which ones town meeting has direct access to. Thank you.
Thank you. Any quick response to that before we move on? No. Okay, thank you for your work. Thank you for your continued work. I'm sure that some of this board will be at your next meeting.
It's May 16th.
May 16th.
Here at 6:15.
Great, we know how to find this room.
You do.
Okay, I appreciate your time.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so much
coming.
for having us.
All right, you're welcome. So we're going to move on to the BDCC economic update. And I believe Adam and Jennifer are here to present, either that or just here to hang out. Great. Maybe you want to introduce yourself, and then this is a substantial report. Wonderful. Thank you so much for it. We don't have time for diving into all of it. We've got about 20 minutes for this item. So maybe 10-minute presentation, 10 minutes for questions.
3-minute
Yeah,
presentation.
great.
Okay, all right.
Great. I'm going to start. My name's Adam Grenold. I'm the executive director at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation.
I'm Jen Stromston. I'm director of programs at BDCC.
So before we get into this report and the data that's in it, wanted to first just take an opportunity to maybe highlight what's not in it. And so what's not in it? It's sort of the silent things that just go unknown. Economic development, a lot of the work is sort of under the hood. We work on things that could take years. We work on things that could take months. And sometimes the report is never there. The data is not there. Sometimes the outcomes show up later in the data. So the mission of the BDCC is to invest in the levers of the economy so that people, businesses, and communities here in Southern Vermont can thrive. In order to do that, we have to really pay attention to those levers. We may hear about a phlebotomist teacher who's going to be leaving and figure out how we can help ensure that that teacher doesn't leave, or replace the teacher, find another way in which that training can occur. We might find out that a gap in some financing that's essential for a business is needed. We can jump in there. We may find out community needs connections, resources, anything along those lines. But the key is being focused on those drivers of the economy. 3 years ago, we focused on one of those drivers, which was the loss of a business. The announcement that Vermont Bread was closing. We worked closely with the court system. We helped support 2 companies who were ready to go back into operation there. Ultimately, there was a bankruptcy sale, and the property was no longer available for those companies to operate, and those jobs were gone. We have spent 3 years trying to reactivate that space. And it takes, we would have liked a lot shorter. We were ready to drive down to southern states to implore upon the decision makers that needed to get back into action. Finally, 2 weeks ago, we purchased the property. I share that for 2 reasons. One, so your audience knows that space is available and ready to be activated. But 2, really to emphasize the importance of the long game and the levers of the economy for the work we do. So much of that is not here. We are here to say what is in here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Sure. Oh, I was gonna actually start with other things that are not in here. So first I want to just give a shout out to Ashna, who's on Zoom watching. Ashna started working for us, I don't know, whatever, right around when we were starting to work on this several months ago. And so got sort of Ashna is a returnee to the region, grew up here, graduated from college a couple of years ago, and we're just lucky that she was back here. And so she played a huge role in this because my brain's getting a little old to run all the numbers and the spreadsheets and stuff. So it's been really great to work on this with somebody with a younger brain. Some of the things that are not in here are, really big things about the economy, right? We're not putting this in enough context. I mean, in a perfect world, everything we're talking about, we would put into the context of the national trends, right? So a couple of the things that we didn't really touch on in here that affect us here, but that are really part of big national or global trends. In the last last year, we've lost the last 2 paper plants, right? So that's part of a long-term change in the entire paper industry that affects the country. It particularly affects the Connecticut River Valley all the way from Holyoke up through other parts of Vermont. That's going to show up a tiny bit in the data here, but it's actually too recent to show up in the data that I'm giving to you because most of the data I'm giving to you has a lag on it. But those are real people and those are real jobs and those are things that we're paying attention to. And that's a change in the composition of the manufacturing sector. So for instance, in this report, I give some dive into the manufacturing data just to give you a sense of we're actually doing really well in this region as far as manufacturing jobs and the steadiness and the pay rates in our manufacturing sector. And it's important because it's a big stabilizing force, brings money into the region. Those are, jobs that are, basically important to the economic base because they're kind of bringing money in and giving households a level of stability and income that they can, frankly, live on. But it is a change. And so when I say positive things, like we're doing well in terms of manufacturing jobs, there is more detail I didn't give you about, some of the other downsides. So when someone looks at that data, I know that someone who follows this is going to say, well, what about the closure of Long Falls and Soundview? So we're aware of that. We just sort of have to pick our battles about how much granularity we get into. There's some other factors, same thing with the consolidation of the higher education sector, right? Vermont has had some of the highest, I think it was the number 1 in the country in terms of number of college students per capita. And so that's a really big part of Vermont's economy and also the national economy. And we've seen, because of demographics and other factors, but largely demographics, a consolidation in higher ed. And so we really lost Marlboro, and we've seen a consolidation of functions at the SAT campus. And so those are national trends we don't really have a lot of control over, and they're in there. They affect Brattleboro. They affect your neighbors. People that are affected by this. So if I didn't touch on something, there's always a reason why. And there's always more to be said. And that's also why this is always a draft. We always call it a draft. Some other changes in the last few years that I didn't really pull out a lot, in the last 2.5 years, we've had refugee resettlement, right? So we have over 300 people, refugees and asylum seekers who've come into southern Vermont. Some have left, some have come through family reunification. I also tried not to focus on the pandemic a lot, partly because I'm sick of it. you know, in the economic data, and partly because I think it was really important to get back to looking at the longer trends in our economy and just sort of what's like really happening, not the disruption. So, I mean, didn't totally ignore it, but yeah, and then there's just always more context that I wish I had time and space to give about sort of that we're a part of a multi-state economy. So we do a thing for Brattleboro. I'm giving you a little regional context, but you look in the parking lot of any employer and there's license plates from Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and we kind of are part of something bigger. So a lot of what we try to do with this is just be sort of educational. So I hope that I've written things in like clear enough language that I'm trying not to be deliberately obtuse. Sometimes I'm just accidentally obtuse, so I apologize. Try to give really clear information up front about like where we go for data, because most of this stuff, this kind of list at the very beginning, there's a bullet list of like places that, we rely on for information. There are others. And if you have other favorite things, I'd love to hear about them. But this is also, these are places you can go for more granular or more up-to-date information. There are some, I think, we talk about the levers or the drivers of change. That's some of what we're trying to get at, is just like, what are the big things that are pushing or pulling on the economy, right? Demographic changes or changes in the labor force and things like that. And that's really kind of how we look at it. And that also ties to sort of our perspective on the economy. We're the kind of holders of the strategic plan, of the economic strategic plan for the region, the SEDS. And, for us, we're trying to take that 5 or 10-year view, or even that generational view about like, what's a thing that can happen today that's going to mean that there are, great jobs for your kids, right? That's going to mean that someone who today is in high school can start a job and, start a business in 5 years. And so a lot of this is just sort of long and slow, and sometimes it doesn't work. Right, as Adam said, that's the fun of economic development. So keep an eye out for the SEDS. I think, you may know this, but we're in our renewal year. So the 2019 Southern Vermont Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies, which is the Regional Economic Strategic Plan, is being redone this year. And so we're kind of in a quiet phase of that, just doing some stakeholder engagement and kind of around topics. But in June, we'll kind of pivot towards the public phase of that. So I hope people will engage in that. That SEDS is really sort of a grassroots built document where we sort of generate ideas about, where we're going next. A lot of the data is being created right now. So you'll get a lot more regional data from our SEDS consultants, who are blessedly people who do that stuff all day long and are better at it. And I'm just going to end on saying a few things that I think, I found interesting and surprising as I was doing this work. I mean, there's a lot. I actually find this really fun and interesting to do. That's why it takes me so long. Sorry. I think the changes in child poverty are really, important to pay attention to, and that some of that may have to do with, different housing solutions and changes. I think it's something to really pay attention to. It's something we've been worried about for the last several years. And I think with the general population being older and frankly a little more affluent, masks what's going on with children and families. I mean, you kind of know this, but it's showing up in the data. It shows up pretty hard in the data. Labor force, changes. I think we've all known that labor force losses are upon us with retirements, and there's not enough in-migration of all kinds to offset that. But, it's real, it's out there, it's a big deal, and it puts like kind of dampening and downward pressure on the economy. The state economists would use the term sometimes in some company, kind of a forced recession kind of thing. It has recessionary push, right? If you don't have the workforce to fill the jobs, when those jobs aren't filled, the money is not earned, the company is not succeeding, that's there. And so we have a lot of jobs that are, they're by definition at risk if they're empty, and they're also hard to account for. It's very hard to count the empty jobs. That's a whole other lecture for me that you don't need tonight, I'm sure. I want to sort of just point to 2 other things. One is Brattleboro's role in the region. I know that the passing of the local option tax is sort of a way to try to really capture more of the economic activity in order to, invest in yourselves. And that's important because Brattleboro is a hub for the region. It's an employment hub. It's a shopping hub. It's all kinds of things. And so I just tried to point out to some other ways in which Brattleboro plays this unique role in the region, right? Brattleboro has, lion's share of the multifamily housing. It has the lion's share. It has half of the people in the county who don't have cars live here. That makes sense. This is a good place to live if you don't have a vehicle, right? So it's, I think I just tried to put a lot of information there, some of it pulled from the state housing, VHFA, and some great, data that's out there about housing, and some of the demographics from the more recent census, just to kind of give a sense of like what a special and unique role Brattleboro plays in terms of, creating a livable place for a much wider variety of people, than, maybe a more bedroom community, for instance. So I think that's just, it's a super important role. And, the job diversity, the sort of diversity of activities here, is, kind of a gift to the wider region. And then the last thing is we really kind of expanded the tax section a little bit. I mean, it's, there's always a lot more to say and worry about, but one of the things you'll see in that last part of the report is, just a little bit more analysis about concerns over the grand list. And this comes from something, that I've been looking at for a long time, just at a state level, that if you sort of normalize for inflation or whatever, you're basically really not seeing the grand list is a really important basis for your budget, right? It is the chief revenue generator. If it can't keep up with inflation, you're doomed out of the gate. And that's been true for the state of Vermont for a long time. And I think it's just something that, there are other taxes. There's, that's really the main one though, that you have some control over. And I think we spend a lot of time and energy in local government, talking about how the money got spent, talking about the line item veto, and not enough time talking about how the money gets made and how the money gets generated. So I think that, trying to right size that to 90% of your solutions are probably going to come from generating more revenue and not from cutting your budget, because there's not that much to cut. So just want to sort of, put in a plug for trying to right size the conversation towards that generative activity. And, how do you make, you can grow your grand list in 3 ways, right? You can either, make stuff nicer, you can add new stuff, or you can, hope the market rises. The first 2 you have some control over the local level, so.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Adam. Board members, questions? Elizabeth and then Richard.
Well, I want to thank you both. There's a lot of information here that really the select board needs to know in order to do our work. And so I'm sure we're all going to take our time and digest this. The one comment that I would like to make is that there's a lot of discussion at town meeting and elsewhere in this board about the purpose of economic development. And you have a line right here that really resonated with me, and I think we all need to understand, and that is that the residential section of our grand list pays the majority of the taxes instead of the commercial property. And one of the goals of economic development is to recalibrate and rebalance that equation. And that's a very important function of economic development. And I appreciate you bringing that to light.
Yes, and I'm going to sort of, say that's not just, I don't know what, I live in Massachusetts and I always have to say that because sometimes I say dumb things about taxes that don't apply in Vermont. So just bear with me. In Massachusetts, we have the ability to do a split tax, right? So you can change the tax rate on commercial properties. And the problem with that is it's already, frankly, pretty expensive to do business in Vermont. And so the temptation is to find a way to get more revenue out of those commercial, those businesses, the commercial, by just levying more taxes. And the reality is, what I'm trying to point out is that we just haven't really done much in terms of development. And we've also, part of what we try to do is stimulate those companies to expand, to invest in their property, to improve their properties, to help build a thing. That's really where you're going to get, the real gains. Otherwise, you end up in this kind of zero-sum game of penalize folks for doing a thing. And so economic development is tough because it feels like it's off in this bind.
Well, and we worked with the town staff to try to go back in time to see what it was. And my predecessor did this as well when he was here. And so it's looking back like 30, 40, 50, 60 years. What was it then? And it's switched. It used to be that the grand list was supported by the commercial, and the residential is less, and now that's switched. So anything we can do to grow that commercial grand list, which, and keep your eye on square foot transaction rates for commercial properties. They are on the increase.
Yeah.
I think it went up a little punk. And so every time that goes up, that's more and more to the commercial and off of the back of the residents. So glad you highlighted that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Richard?
When I reviewed the town budget for the first time, the issue of the imbalance between the revenue from taxes for the commercial and real estate stuck out to me even as a non-number person, and seemed to me one of the first ideas that came to my mind was that we really can't do much, can't squeeze more money out of the people that are already here and paying a lot of taxes, that we really need to figure out a way to attract new business to the town, and not just small business, but larger businesses that employ a lot of people that will bring more tax revenue to the town. So then, in my imagination, this is sort of like a fantasy that I'm thinking about, is that, let's say Amazon called up John and said, you know, we like your location. It's very central in New England. We want to put a fulfillment center in Brattleboro. I mean, that probably never happens. But reading your report, it's clear to me the people that would work there wouldn't be able to find housing. We probably don't have enough of a labor force. Am I correct in assuming that Brattleboro and this region really couldn't accommodate a large new business?
Well, thank you. You bring a great topic forward. It's something locally here, our organization, nationally, economic development is really trying to understand what is success. And in the past, you used to measure success by supporting a business that went out and created jobs. And so now in an environment where we can no longer measure success by creation of new jobs, because some of them may go unfilled. So what we have to now focus on is on the quality of the jobs and the ability for the region to support the life cycle of jobs from entry level all the way through. In a functioning economy has all those different elements. So the question is, can a region with a fixed number of workforce individuals accommodate a new firm? And the answer is yes, because that new firm is going to draw new people and it's going to create a competition, and folks will come to the area for the jobs if they're high wage, high growth, if they afford an opportunity for someone perhaps with no skills. Maybe the market is already saturated with high skill jobs and this is a no skill job. So all jobs are important. All filled jobs are important. So, you know, to answer your question, if a new company comes here and sets up shop, we have the confidence that we could help them fulfill those positions through a variety of different techniques used for recruitment, for moving people in similar fields over to that. And again, a functioning economy will replace jobs that they left from.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I said, I'm going to contradict myself, right? I said earlier, like, we're part of this regional economy and that's how we have to think about it. But in strictly like my day job, our day jobs, like, we're here to help the county, right? We're here to serve the Wyndham region, County +4. And so, you know, if it means that someone who's leaving this county to go to a job in New Hampshire takes a job here, that's better for them, that's a win. And it's really not my problem what happens to New Hampshire, you know? So I think we think that we can do that. We think that we can kind of compete in that way. You know, there's a little bit of data in here that I just want to point out that sort of speaks to that and the wage growth, which is one of the indicators we were tracking as Vermont Yankee was closing. You know, we knew that we were losing a lot of really well-paid jobs. And so we were already lagging behind our other regional neighbors. And so we've been paying attention to that indicator, like, how are we doing just relative to Franklin and Cheshire counties as far as wage growth? Yeah. And one of the good things about the pandemic and the labor shortage is that we're actually sort of like on par at this point, which is pretty cool. Wyndham County also has had more population growth than any other part of the state than Burlington. So, you know, this is a little bit by inches, you know what I mean? Like, but I think that everything that we do is like that, you know, bringing refugees, working with high schoolers to make sure that they know that there are jobs here for them if they want them. Like that's kind of how we're going to win at this. We're not out there looking for like the big whale. You know, that's not really what most rural economic development is about. It's about improving the tolerances.
We had a fun whale that we chased for a while, which was a Vermont firm that was looking to relocate. It was a public process. So we have to move within Vermont. And so there's this really geeky term, it's called a location quotient. And it tells you, in essence, how many people in that region, in that workforce, provide the services or have worked in the field that your company has. So you can identify a good location to move to because there is an identified workforce that works in that region. So knowing how to find that and how to put that right in front of an employer who's considering the region, show them that, yes, we can make that employment work for you.
So does that mean that possibly there's an ideal business size for this location that would work the best?
All of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to dismiss the question, but
No.
most of our employers, or most of the people in this region work for larger employers, but most of the employers are small.
Right. Like 80-something% are under 100 people. I mean, but the majority of jobs are in, but yeah. So it's, you know, it's tricky. I mean, and we need them all. Right, we really do. Like we absolutely, like one of the things that's actually great about this economy in this region is it's diversified. We don't just rely on one tire plant, right? We don't just rely on a hospitality employer, right? We actually have a little bit of diversity and that smooths out the rough edges. And so that's really, that's key to maintaining our resilience, you know, economically. And that means big employers and small employers and.
Okay. Let's take a couple of questions from the public if they have them. Right.
Hey, Rick's right here. First of all, is the report available to the public? And if so, how do we find it?
It's on our website. It's on your.
Yeah, it's part of our backup material, which is published for every single meeting.
Yeah, I figured that'd be answered, but I thought the
But
public
it's
might
also,
want to
it's
know.
on our website. It wasn't
Yeah,
like sent it to the town. It's,
Right.
we have just a publications tab. Everything is on there.
So as a small employer, I gotta say that my issues with workforce primarily are skill sets. And I would urge anybody with the power to do so to try and support the trade schools and apprenticeships and all of that good stuff and get the kids away from the darn screens and get them out there in the fresh air and put a hammer or a wrench in their hand and get them doing stuff. I think that, you know, if we could get the kids out of their parents' basements and away from their cell phones, we would have a robust workforce. There was something else. Oh, in your thought process, does anticipating refugees, climate refugees, political refugees, perhaps, we had a bunch of COVID refugees. I've seen some of all of those in the last 4 years. I'm friends with several of them, but I think that is a drop in the bucket compared to what we might have. And I am very worried that we could get overwhelmed by that if we aren't ahead of the curve in terms of planning for it. And I would love to talk further offline about that.
Well, I'm expressly forbidden from talking about the housing because I.
Yeah.
I
I would
think
do
a great
it.
opportunity would
Yeah.
be to really pay attention to the SEDS, the comprehensive
Yeah,
economic
please.
development
Yeah, yeah.
strategy, because we're looking for feedback and input into that, and your voice is sought after. And
So how would people like myself connect with you guys to talk?
We'll get, right now it's like, we'll pivot at the end of May to like the actual public stuff. So this is one of the first times we're saying publicly, there's gonna be public stuff. I mean, there always is gonna do this.
on
but,
our website,
it'll
when you
be-
go to, if you go to get the, actually, you can have my copy.
Yeah, we'll do press releases.
But you can sign up for the newsletter, and the newsletter will inform you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. No,
Thank you.
huge topic.
Okay.
Daniel? I have a
Yes.
question I'd like to pose to our panelists.
Good. And make it brief because we are way past time already.
Sorry.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
do a really good job of asking my question.
Great.
My question is, and it has a two-part answer. is Brattleboro a good place to start, run, or grow a business? And the two-part answer is one in reality and the other by reputation. And are there things that the select board or the community in general can do to improve matters?
And if you need a longer amount of time to answer this question, maybe you want to put it in writing to us or.
Yeah, it's right. I don't mean that there should be a
Yeah.
quick and easy answer to this.
There's amazing support in the community. So the short answer is yes, but there's a lot under that and how to get there.
So, I didn't encounter that question specifically in your report, and I'd really be interested to hear your perspective on it. I'm not somebody with a business background, so I just hear bits and pieces of information, complaints or praise or something. If that were available in some organized fashion, especially from a functional point of view of what can be done about that, I'd really like to hear it.
Good question.
So much to come on that. So, yeah, yep,
Thank you.
you will hear more about that.
Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for fielding the questions. And we look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So next item of business, no motion on that one. Next item of business is the summer DPW work update. And we have presenters here.
We have
This
Dan Tyler,
Hello, Dan.
Peter Lynch, and
Peter
Dan
Lynch.
Pacheco.
Darren Pacheco.
Peter's gonna sit.
Peter's just going to observe from the peanut gallery. Very good. Take it away, gentlemen.
Sure. Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
We just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of update you on our work plans for the summer. Included in the memo is kind of a proposed project list that Darren has put together. It's ambitious, but we think we can get through it all this summer. We hope. There's a lot of just knowledge of our infrastructure that goes into our project planning, but on top of that, we're taking into account our budget, grant opportunities, other projects that are happening around town, community input, planning studies that have happened, and putting it all together. Recently, we've added the OpenGov asset management program, as well as the pavement management data that we were able to acquire. And it's going to take some time to build out OpenGov and really be able to utilize the asset management. But, we're working towards a place where these decisions will really be data driven, but by the asset needs that exist within the town. So this summer, late last fall, we learned of VTran's plan to come to town next year, 2026 and 27, 2-year paving project. They're gonna pave all the class 1 roads in town. So Main Street, Canal Street, Western Avenue, Vernon Street, Putney Road, as well as the state highway portion of Putney Road and 142. So that's gonna stretch over 2 years. So we kind of really, parts of that area of town, and Western Avenue, it's been 20-something years since they've been here. Main Street, it's been 15-ish years. So we've kind of shifted our focus and wanted to get ahead of those projects and look at our needs and what we can do before they pave, so that we're not coming in behind them and cutting up a new road and making repairs. So that you'll see an emphasis on sidewalk here. VTrans, they'll pave, they'll do new pavement markings, they'll do signs, they'll do some ADA improvements to crosswalks, but they're not going to do any sidewalk improvements. The worst of our sidewalk in those class 1 sections is really on Western Avenue. So right now we have a section that extends from Edward Heights to Greenleaf Street out to bid. That's gonna take last year's capital sidewalk money, this year's capital sidewalk money, and the additional money that was set aside. Hopefully we'll be able to cover that project. There's also a bunch of other locations that we're gonna do ourselves, that they're smaller sections, traffic control's easier, we can do it with a smaller crew. And those are kind of throughout the class 1s. And then other areas of sidewalk in town are kind of in neighborhoods. You'll see like the Oak Grove Clark Ave neighborhood, the kind of Swedesville and Green Hill Parkway, Allerton, that neighborhood. What we're trying to do is, those are areas that we can do ourselves, and we're trying to set, those are areas that need to be paved. So we're trying to set those up for the years to come. Ideally, we're trying to look at projects as a whole. So we're not just going in and paving a street and not addressing the other needs. You know, we'd really like to be able to address the sidewalk needs, address the utility needs, stormwater before we come in. So that's kind of where this all comes from. There's one other section of Western Avenue that the sidewalk's really bad from, so it's on the Glen Street to Greenleaf Street, on the north side of the avenue. We don't have the budget in the sidewalk, in the capital sidewalk. We don't have the resources to do that section ourselves. So think maybe it'd be a good idea to use some of the capital paving money to do that section of sidewalk before the paving project takes place. Estimates about $250,000. That kind of aligns with that conversation at RTM about additional paving versus bike ped infrastructure. It's hard because we know we have a lot of roads that need paving as well. But this is kind of like a opportunity that doesn't come very often, and we feel like it's best to get out ahead of it and get as much work as we can get done before they pave. And then that additional sidewalk work in towns would set us up for larger paving projects in the years to come. We will do some paving, we'll do some pavement management, crack sealing. That's been bid out already. We have a contract in place. We've applied for some grant money through the V-Trans for class 2 road paving. We'll see where that goes. That's a project that would be nice to do, but if the grant funding is not there, we'll wait till the next grant cycle. The lower Birch Street area is in tough shape, and we're going to get in there as soon as the floodplain management work's done and the contractor moves their equipment out. We'll look at repaving that neighborhood. And we have a lot of other projects. Stormwater improvements continue to be focused on the MRGP work and the gravel roads. There's still strong grant funding to support that. So we've got sections, that's prioritized through the gravel road inventory. So we're working through that list still. We've got a design for the Brandon Street wall. We'll have a design for the Akeley Road Bridge. That's a grant fund from last year. That's V-Trans Structures grant. The Brandon Street walls funded through the budget. There's a bunch of utility work that's it kind of coincides with this plan. So it focuses in those neighborhoods. The utility crew has done a lot of inspection of sewer lines. We have good data on the water lines. So they're going to do some work on Green Hill Parkway this summer to get prepared, and as well as some projects in the watershed, and then general maintenance around town. Pleasant Valley, hopefully that project's going to wrap up in the next month, maybe. We'll be down to punch list, and then we'll get that completed. Wastewater treatment plant, it's kind of, summer is a lot of maintenance for them, cleaning stuff, fixing stuff. And they've got the retreat sewer pump station project underway. That should be wrapping up in the next couple months. So there's a lot here. Darren's list really kind of outlines each project and gives a little more detail. I'm happy to answer any questions or
Great.
you may have.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Darren. Darren, did you write the memo?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Dan took all the credit for it just there, but this is a nice memo.
I gave him credit in the memo.
I just want to say it publicly. Thank you to you both. Board members, questions for these folks? Elizabeth?
I'd also like to commend you for this list. It's really clear, not only for the select board, but for the public to understand. And as you know, it was a big issue at town meeting. I just have a bunch of questions. Do you hire summer help to do this work?
We have positions available. We try to. We're not always
Are you thinking of
successful in
applying?
finding people.
Maybe. And how much of this work is proposed to be done by the DPW versus contracts?
So the larger sidewalk projects are contracts work. The paving work is typically contracted, the larger scale paving work, so like that Bird Street neighborhood. I'd like to contract some of the MRGP work. It's a pretty good split. You know, money wise, I think it's more of it's contracted. Quantity of work, we'll do a lot of it in-house.
Yeah, it makes sense when you were saying that if you get the grant money, you'll do this work. Obviously, you have a limited staff
Right.
to do the work. Next question is, can you explain why in sequencing it's easier to do, or it's required to do the sidewalk first before the state comes in and paves?
So they're gonna do what they call mill and fill. So they're gonna take 2 inches out and put 2 inches back, and they'll pave right to the curb line. So, you know, it'll be a seamless road surface, curb to curb. If we do it before, they'll pave right to our new curb, everything's sealed up. If we go in afterwards, we've got to remove a section of that new pavement. So now we've created another joint that is potential for freeze thaw, water, and it just affects the longevity of the road.
Great,
And,
thank you.
you know, they're responsible for major rehabilitations, but we're responsible for maintenance. So, you know, it's more potholes, more.
And the two large sections on the avenue that we want to do, both don't have curb right now.
Mhm.
Just an old concrete edge. We want to put granite curb in. And then in these other sections, even if they pave, we can come in afterwards, tear the concrete out, but leave the curb and not, you know, do anything with the new road.
Great. Okay, so my last question is the toughie. What do you have to say about the Western Avenue bike lane and striping? And and
You looking for town opinions or personal opinions?
no, just, you know, from the opinion of a professional in the DPW, you know, how will that pan out when the state paves and so forth?
So that project was a scoping study and grant project through V-Trans. We looked at a lot of different alternatives. There was a lot of community input. People were excited about it, and I think there was a big push for us to implement it, and we did that too fast. And it was kind of incomplete in places. Our intention is to put it back, to repaint everything again, the new configuration this summer. The old lines have worn off now. The texture from where we removed the lines is smooth. I think we need to give it another chance. It hasn't had a fair shake. That being said, V-Trans is looking at it through their paving project, and they might make suggestions on how to change it, improve it, get rid of it. We don't know yet.
So we'll give it some more time. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz, for that question. I just want to kind of add on to that. I drove on Western Ave earlier this afternoon and noticed some striping happening on the bike lanes, which is great. You know, it's really important that those are visible. The rough texture in the road, sort of near the middle of the road, is tough for drivers. You know, you feel that when you're driving on that you're in a part of the road that you shouldn't be, and yet that's exactly where the lines are taking you. So if there's any work that can be done on that this summer to smooth that out, I think that would be beneficial. Obviously, you guys know best in that, but I just want to voice that. Richard, you had a question.
Are these summer projects listed in terms of priority?
No.
No. But I'm assuming you have a priority list. If there's some you don't get to, it's not the end of them.
Right, and some of them, you know, that our fiscal year and the construction year don't align. So, you know, there's an opportunity for us to do some of these next spring as well, if we don't get them. And still, you know, budget-wise, we're working on FY 25 budget here. So that may extend into the beginning of next construction season.
Great.
One other little, where's
Yep.
Sawdust Alley?
So that's the lower Bird Street area where 250 Birds, where that floodplain restoration project is happening. So it's kind of that neighborhood of, I don't know what the other streets are there.
A baker.
Former
Holden,
lumber
Yeah.
zone, I guess.
It's really a fabulous area and planting a lot of trees and, you know, obviously it provides flood storage, but it's really a new park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah.
France?
Yeah.
France?
I noticed one of the items on your list is the William Street wall repair, which I would have just conceptually thought might be part of the William Street to Guilford Street re-envisioning project. And might, you know, how that's done might depend on what happens to William Street, I would think. What happens with the parking lot for the Vermont Country Deli and questions that have yet to be resolved. So I'm just wondering, is this something that you're really ready to go ahead with based on possible future developments?
So future development ideas were looked at when that slide happened, and it was kind of determined that for the stability of the road, it needs to be repaired regardless. There's a design in place for it. Brian Bannon applied for a FEMA grant, and we're waiting to hear back on that. And the board did allocate funds to do the project, but the FEMA grant will cover 90% of it if we can get it. So, and it seems like there's a good chance we can. It's just on FEMA time.
And what would FEMA's timeframe usually be to let us know about funding?
I think that'd be a question for Brian. I know
How
Brian's
long
had
could they
some
possibly take?
communication with them, and he feels like they're getting closer. So,
Okay. Something about our town that I've noticed is how beautiful that section of the Whetstone Brook is with the waterfall there. And it's true, there's a big pipe running through the middle of it, but if you kind of ignore that, it's quite picturesque. I mean, I would really like to see it if there was some more increased visual access to that. And it's always been that the wall that was there or whatever has been there has completely blocked any visual access. So I'm just putting in a plug for, can you let us see that wonder of nature a little more clearly?
so we did look into like a viewing area or something, but that bank is so sheer that to build out just isn't feasible. So it'll be a concrete curb with guardrail mounted on top of it. I mean, you'll be able to look over more than you can now for sure, but not like a viewing area per se.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? No? Okay, questions from members of the public? Hello, public. Public on Zoom. Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. Thank you to you and your team for all of this work. This summit's an ambitious plan, and I hope you can pull it off. And we'll see you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, board, we're gonna have one more item, and then we're gonna take a break, and then we're gonna do the utility fund. So next item of business is consumption of alcoholic beverages ordinance. This is a first reading, so we will hear about it, make some comments, but we will not take action tonight. Patrick.
Yes, sir. So the board is asked tonight to conduct a first reading of a proposed change to Brattleboro Code of Ordinance, chapter 1.5, which is the alcoholic beverage chapter in the town ordinance. And the principal purpose of chapter 1.5 is to prohibit the possession and consumption of alcoholic beverages on public property. This would include streets and sidewalks, parks, and all manner of publicly owned lands. There is currently an exemption that can be provided by the town manager's office for specific events. So Gallery Walk happened this last week. I'm pretty confident they had a beer tent of some variety And the reason that that is permissible is due to the exemption that exists within chapter 1.5, where the town manager can sign off on a specific event so that they can sell alcoholic beverages in public. The reason we're coming back to you this evening, even though there was a change just 2 years ago to provide for that exemption, was at that time, we were also intending to provide a pathway for a restaurant that was serving meals on the sidewalk out in front of their business to be able to simultaneously serve a glass of wine or something like that with dinner. And interestingly enough, there is a current request of the town for that type of activity. Upon review by the town attorney, the existing ordinance does not provide for that opportunity. It is limited to events. And try as I did to persuade the town attorney that the event is dinner time, he wasn't buying it. And so the changes that are presented to you are provided in a strikeout underline basis. And in essence, what this would allow is for the town manager to exempt for a specific period of time the consumption of alcoholic beverages, whether at an event or for going along with a restaurant. So there is also one other change to the ordinance, that being that public place no longer includes school-owned property. And so we would never have issued a, let's allow for the consumption of alcohol on school-owned property. But by removing it from the definition of public place, it sort of permanently removes that option from consideration. So I want to leave it there and see if there are any questions.
Very good. Board, questions for Mr. Morland? Elizabeth?
Thank you, Patrick. Is it clear that this consumption of alcohol is tied to meals?
It's clear that consumption is tied to what?
Meals, food.
It's not written in that way. However, it is written in a way that it is dependent upon the judgment of the town manager. And so what we have concluded at the management team is that the event-oriented activities have worked out and have been successful. And if there is a restaurant that is serving a meal on the sidewalk out in front of their business, that we really didn't have any objection to allowing them to serve a glass of wine or a glass of beer or something like that with the meal. So as it is presently written, it would put that discretion at in the hands of the town manager.
Okay, so where I'm coming from is essentially the protection of children and minors and the prohibition of having, open carry in the town of Brattleboro, because it's not New Orleans. And so I would like the ordinance to be more specific, to have meals so that the town does not have what equates to a series of bars on the sidewalk. I would like it to be tied to food.
Okay. Are you making a motion to that?
We don't really need a motion, but if the rest of the board is interested in that sort of language to be explored, we could bring it back in a second reading.
Okay, I think I'd be interested to hear from the rest of the board at this point. Francis is.
Well, I'm wondering whether this at Gallery Walk, say last week, if there was a beer tent or something like that, was there food served at that beer tent, or would we have, if food is required, would we have had to either tell them, well, you gotta get some hot dogs or you can't have your event? I mean, I just wonder if there are cases that have been reviewed where where the availability of food might interfere with the plan?
So I didn't attend Gallery Walk. I don't know if there was food served with the beer. I know there was food served at the event, and I know there was beer served at the event. As to whether or not they were sort of co-served, I don't know.
So
Peter?
I'm just wondering if, so with an event like Gallery Walk, I think it's pretty much like we're gonna serve beer and you can walk around and you can take in everything. You can chat with your friends. You can do whatever. You can get a hot dog if you want a hot dog, but I don't think it's up in those particular events up to the person with the catering license providing the beer to necessarily serve food. But what I'm reading in this and what I'm trying to clarify, and I think Liz was trying to get to, was at a restaurant that is downtown, pick a restaurant, any restaurant, they want to put out 4 or 5 tables, and people are seated eating a meal. Will they be able to have a glass of wine, a beer, a mixed drink? Am I following what you were saying? Right? And with that exemption, is that allowed, or is that something that we have to go to our town manager for permission for every night?
So I wouldn't recommend it being a daily permission. I would recommend that it piggyback on the alcohol license that the establishment needs to have, which is an annual. So
I guess, I'm sorry, I guess that's what I was driving at. That wouldn't be, if they had that permit, if we approved that permit for a restaurant to bring on the sidewalk with their meal, having a drink with their meal would be nothing, I guess, that they would have to bother, say, the town manager to do every night.
we would operationalize that into an annual process.
Right, okay.
To piggyback on the annual liquor license
No.
of the facility.
Let me just clarify. It's my understanding that this process is to permit what you described.
Right.
And my purpose is to make sure that the opposite is not true, that just alcohol without a meal is not
Like you can't go
guaranteed.
with a friend, sit outside and have a beer.
Right.
Right. I see what you're saying. I see your concern. I don't know. Guess I would have to think about that as to whether I would have an issue with that or not. But I know open air bar is not a thing, shouldn't be a thing. But
So it seems to me that the assumption is, as you first described, to have a meal and have alcohol with that meal.
right.
Fine. And what I'm trying to avoid is alcohol without meal, so that essentially the sidewalk becomes
So the
an
stipulation
open
being,
bar.
we're gonna sit down and have a meal and have a drink with that meal. We're gonna sit down and have a drink, go inside.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
I just want to pull back a little bit. So my understanding of this ordinance is that it's about the prohibition of the possession of an open container and the consumption of any alcoholic beverage in a public place. And one of the major changes that you made in these ordinances was removing schools as part of public places. I wonder if maybe there's something here about like our understanding of liquor licenses and how they're, issued in town and what the provisions are. I don't know, I feel like we're getting a little lost in this one. I'm not quite clear what we're trying to achieve anymore.
If I can, there are a number of restaurants throughout town that have outside consumption permits.
Right.
Those outside consumption permits are typically on their property. There are no outside consumption permits that I am aware of, but obviously there can't be, because the reason we're here is essentially to try and make an adjustment to that. There are no outside consumption permits on public property, because up until this point in time, outside consumption on a public property
Was prohibited.
isn't available.
Yeah.
There is a restaurant, that we are aware of that has asked, can we serve our food on the sidewalk? And we went and measured, and there's more than adequate space for probably 2, maybe 3 little tables that would keep a pathway on the sidewalk that would be ADA accessible. So in terms of serving food at tables out in front of the restaurant, that works. They would like to be able to serve a beverage with their meal. That doesn't necessarily address Liz's point. Might somebody pull up and just order a beer? As to whether or not that's something the board would be supportive of keeping prohibited or not, for your discussion.
Okay, thank you. Board, further comments? France?
Personally, I'd like to be able to go sit down there and drink a beer.
Mhm.
See where that might somehow develop into a problem. But, you know, there's already laws about what you can do with alcohol and what you can't do. So I'd be okay, you know, without including that in this ordinance.
Okay. Other comments? 1 second. So it might be helpful in the second reading to hear a little bit more about outdoor consumption permits. So, you know, like we do have folks in our community who are licensed to sell alcohol, who have some sort of patio or outdoor seating area. Those folks are covered by their current permits, correct?
So,
Yeah.
all right, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
As soon as
I
I
just-
said
this
it, I
won't be
understood what
surprised.
the word was, out on the patio. That's an example of somebody who's has an outside consumption permit on their property.
Yes.
And so this would be not a change in the rules that govern outside consumption. There would still need to be a, you know, designated
Mhm.
space, et cetera. But the underlying ground could be publicly owned if it
Mhm.
had the authorization from the town manager.
Okay, and so for a while during the pandemic, Hermit Thrush, which is on High Street, used some of the space in the High Grove parking lot, which is town-owned, for a kind of patio area.
They had a little beer garden, basically.
Yeah, and if we were to pass this ordinance as it's written, would it allow for that type of activity again?
It would with the,
Provided that the
with
town
the-
manager's office authorizes
Yes.
it. Okay. Okay. So Liz, you are kind of seeking to have an option for this ordinance to read include, for it to be a provision that meals are also served.
Yes.
Okay. Are there other board members that are also looking to see that come back in the second reading? Peter?
You know, I mean, I'm sort of with Franz, which is a little terrifying. But
I think it's great.
I do. So, you know, that I think 2 responsible adults can sit down and have a beer outside on a nice night.
Yeah.
I fear that we are always sort of focused on the 3 to 5% that upset that rule. So and with that, with that in mind, I wouldn't mind that having the provision that food be part of that stipulation.
Okay.
So
I wonder, John, Patrick, and others, whether this might want to come back with an option or.
We can, but short of hearing 3
Yeah,
board
no-
members really pushing for the food, I would say that, you know, permits are revocable. So if we were to give a permit to a hermit situation and it didn't work out, we could always revoke that permit and pull it back.
Mhm.
It's really up to the board.
Elizabeth?
So the responsibility lies with the permit holder.
and much like any liquor license, right? I mean,
Yep.
I mean, well, we just have a little bit more direct impact because they're using this permit on our land.
Mhm. Yep.
All right, I think with that in mind, thank you for pointing that out. I think I will kind of just say, I think two responsible adults can sit outside on a nice night and have a drink without food.
Okay, well, more than two. Okay, any further comment from the select board on this? No, let's check in with the public. Public in the room? No. Public on Zoom? Not so much. Okay, John, do you have what you need for the second reading?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much.
No motions needed on this. We're gonna adjourn for a 5-minute break and we will reconvene at 8:09 for the FY 25 proposed utility fund budget. Okay, reconvening select board post break. Item on the agenda that is up next is new business E, the proposed FY 25 utility fund budget. I'm assuming that somebody is going to present this, and I think it's Patrick. They faked me out. They're just here to make sure you got it right.
So it's going to be a bit of a team effort.
Okay.
I'll do the initial introduction of the budget. I would then hope to pass it off to Dan Tyler to talk about capital. I'll then take it up again to talk about cash reconciliation, and then we'll discuss a recommendation related to utility rates.
Very well.
Works?
Wonderful.
Good. So the proposed budget for fiscal 25 in the utility fund has an increase in revenue of just 1%. From $6,397,750 in fiscal 24 to $6,459,410 in fiscal 25. And it's the reason why there is but a single 1% increase in revenues is because that's what our ordinance calls for. And one of the things that then makes very clear for us is that a 1% increase in utility rates raises $61,600. And so that'll become a little bit more important a little later on in the discussion. But on the revenue side of the utility fund budget, we're essentially looking at just a single 1% increase in revenues over the previous year. On the expense side, however, the fiscal 25 budget is $6,946,645, which is a 7% increase over fiscal 24. An increase of approximately $468,167. So, question is, where in the utility fund is that increase? And I'd like to start by saying it's not in staff salaries and benefits. And the reason for that is a
Can I
couple.
interrupt you for a second?
I'm sorry?
I thought that the amount of increase was 393,000, and I think you gave a larger figure than that.
Did I?
That is what's in them. But maybe I'm.
No,
Am I
possible. I sometimes will look at the wrong number when I
That's comforting to know.
No. You'd be surprised how many mistakes I can make.
And then get corrected.
Uh-huh.
So
Checks and balances.
the current,
I'm just reading from page 89 of the memo expenses.
so the increase in cost from fiscal 25 over fiscal 24 is $468,167.
And we don't see that on page 89.
No, we see 393, 167.
Oh, we added the 75.
It's entirely possible. We had a last minute addition that was added maybe 2 days ago or a day ago. And I may have missed that in my edit of the memo. Okay.
Thank you.
And so forgive me for that. The increase in cost year over year is $468,167. The question is, where in the utility fund budget is that? And as I was just saying, it is not in staff and staff salaries and in benefits. And the reason for that is not because the utility fund staff are not receiving any wage increases or any promotions. They certainly are. However, as older, more seasoned and more expensive employees retire, they're being replaced by younger, somewhat less experienced, but certainly less costly staff. And that's yielding a savings. In addition to that, at the water treatment facility, as some of the board members may recall, as we began the process of building the new water treatment facility, we promoted an additional water chief operator so that the existing and soon to retire water chief operator could focus on producing clean water in the old plant, while the new water chief operator could focus on getting to understand the functioning of the new system. And so for a period of time, I think it's been maybe 2 or possibly 3 years, we've had 2 chief water operators. As Dan Tyler said a little while ago, that project's about to come to a close, perhaps within the next month. So in fiscal 25, we're no longer planning for 2 chief water operators. And as a consequence of that, you'll notice a decrease in staffing costs and also benefit costs. Also, for the very same reason, there is a reduction in heating costs because for the last couple of years, we've needed to heat both the old water treatment plant and the new water treatment plant. With just having one water treatment facility in fiscal 25, there can be a reduction in heating costs of about $7,000. The major increase in utility fund expenses is occurring in what we've summarized as operating expenses. And this is for a variety of reasons, some of which shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. One, for example, is the cost of sludge removal has gone up. We had a contract before the select board. It was just last fall. And one of the things that was very apparent at that time is that the cost of sludge removal was going up. In this case, it's going up over $109,000. So that's a new operating expense and is driving up costs in the utility fund budget. Also, as the board may recall, as we completed the general fund budget for fiscal 25, there was a reduction in the general fund around liability insurance. There's a corresponding increase in liability insurance here in the utility fund. Just to sort of revisit what was going on there, previous finance directors had split out costs like liability insurance based on the size of the budget. So the general fund is the largest budget, it got the lion's share of the general liability. Parking has the smallest budget, it had the smallest share. Kim recognized that perhaps what we should be doing is apportioning general liability expense based on where the assets are. And the assets are in the utility fund. That's where we've got a $33 million wastewater plant, where we've got a new $14 million water treatment plant. That's where we're really spending some money in terms of insuring our assets. And so that should have the lion's share of the general liability expense, which is why liability is going up by $178,000 in the utility fund. There's some additional costs associated with OpenGov and the adoption of OpenGov in the utility fund. The asset management profile is being added. What John spoke about a little earlier, the utility billing, all of that is driving up costs at least a little bit in the utility fund. And then one of the things that came out of a conversation earlier this week, the thing that was added very late in the process, and the thing for which I should have caught that initial error, was we'd like to add a $75,000 engineering expense. And the purpose of that would be to conduct a more thorough analysis and investigation into our rates. This hasn't been done for certainly not in the period of time that I've worked for the town, and probably quite a while longer. I think staff do a very good job of keeping an eye on what we should be doing both in terms of capital projects, in terms of operations, and in terms of setting our rates. But we think it might be time to bring in some technical experts to, particularly in light with some of the things that Dan's going to talk about in the next few minutes in terms of additional capital, to make sure that we position ourselves well in the coming years and that we can maintain a slow and steady increase in rates as much as possible. So perhaps a more technical expert on utility rates would be in order. And for this reason, we've increased professional services by $75,000 as an estimate for what we think that's going to cost. There's only a few other slight increases in the expense side, a slightly enhanced transfer out, and that is based once again on our finance director's analysis of the utility fund's use of general fund services, which is, for example, the time that John spends reviewing this, the time that I spend, the time that Kim Frost spends. We're all general fund assets, but the utility fund borrows our time and attention. And this increase in the transfer out is to offset the increasing costs within the general fund. So what we find is a fiscal 25 budget with revenues of 6.4 million and expenses of about 6.9 million, leading a fairly substantial deficit. This is the largest deficit that I can recall in the utility fund. Having a deficit in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. Having a deficit of this size will prove to be challenging. The board might ask, should we be concerned? Is this something we should be worried about? And what I would say is, I think there may be action we will recommend that you take, and we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But is there a need for panic? I'd say no. And here's why. The utility fund budget in fiscal 23 planned for a grant in the amount of $440,000. This was a grant given to the town by the Economic Development Administration based on some work that we did with our friends over there at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. The EDA was a partner in an expanded water and sewer infrastructure project at the Exit 1 Industrial Park. And so the EDA contributed $440,000 to what was an $880,000 water and sewer upgrade at that location. That was planned to be received in fiscal 23. It wasn't received in fiscal 23. There were some pandemic related supply chain events that dragged that project out a little bit. But we know for a fact that we did receive that grant in fiscal 24. I think it was August or September of that year. So there is going to be an additional $440,000 falling within fiscal 24 that is all but offsetting this particular deficit. Now, I'm not saying that means we can just disregard and move on. I am saying this is not a house on fire situation. At that, I would suggest I hand it over to Dan and he can talk a little bit about capital.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
So we'll save all of our questions for the end.
Unless you prefer to speak directly to the
board's
budget
pleasure on that?
itself.
Let's hear more.
Any more? All right,
Hear
Dan?
more? Sure. So capital plan spreadsheet looks a lot like it does every year. Very similar list of projects.
What page are we looking at here, Dan? 94 or?
It's a great question. I don't have the
So that everybody.
104.
Ooh. You're talking about like the kind of memo starting on page 101. I thought Dan was referring to a spreadsheet.
It's right after the memo.
Uh-huh.
I believe it's the first spreadsheet. It's very tiny.
Yes. Get out your magnifying glasses.
Yep.
All right, Dan. Thanks.
Well played.
Yeah.
So the memo kind of guides you through the spreadsheet. And each of the categories in the memo are the columns on the spreadsheet. So, you've got your project list, FY 24 budget, what we budgeted last year, and then you've got the proposed carry forward. So this is money that we budgeted for projects in the past that we haven't spent yet, essentially. For a variety of different reasons, there's a couple projects that have to do with infrastructure around the water treatment plant. So we haven't been able to get to those projects because we don't want to get in the way of that plant upgrade, which has taken longer than we expected. There's a whole bunch of money that's set aside for the future Putney Road expansion. That'll be our portion of the utilities that need to be upgraded when that project happens. And then there's the phase 1 utility project that we voted on the bond a couple years ago. We're waiting on the state. There's some application process that we're still going through before we can start construction on that. So a lot of those type of situations, that number's about $1 million higher than it was last year. But we're in a place where we're gonna knock a bunch of them off this year. The Hinsdale Bridge work is done. We haven't been billed for it, but that's over $300,000. Hopefully we'll get the phase 1 water improvements started. We probably won't spend a bunch of money, but we'll get the project underway. The retreat pump station, that project's gonna wrap up here pretty soon. And then some of them are kind of annual maintenance or annual funds like water meters. Ever since the pandemic, we've had a real difficult time getting meters. So we've kind of fallen behind on our replacement program there, but the supply chain's getting better. So hopefully we'll get back on track there. So I think we're gonna continue to carry forward money each year, but I think we're gonna knock some of these off this year. The next column's this year's proposed budget, FY 25. If you go down through the spreadsheet, the monies allocated correspond with projects that we've allocated money for in the future. So they're, the remainder of our responsibility for those projects. There's actually no new projects budgeted this year in FY. I take that back. The Wilson's Woods sewer pump station, $175,000. That's the only new project on that list this year. And then further down on the list is our fleet. So that fleet replacement program's been in place for a while. It seems to be working out really well. The intervals that we're trading in, we're getting good trade values. And it seems to be working. So there's one piece of equipment at the wastewater plant that is up for replacement this year. And then there's $175,000 for the back truck. That's the same back truck that we've talked about on the general fund side. It's a shared piece of equipment between the general fund and the utility. So that's the utilities portion of that piece of equipment. So a lot of, I think a lot of these are familiar projects, and nothing really stands out as new. As you work further into the plan, there's not as much detail with the projects. So water mains and sewer mains are kind of in there, just a line item for water mains and sewer mains. There's a separate list that we maintain of those projects. And that's where you really start to see the increases that Patrick mentioned as you go out. And the majority of those are water main projects. And those are coming from a couple years ago, we received a planning grant through the Water Investment Division for a hydraulic analysis of our water system. So Dufresne Group is still in the process of completing that, but through their initial review, they compared flow data, calculated flow data to actual measured flow data throughout the system. And there's areas where they saw a decreased flow, And those correspond with, older infrastructure in town. And a lot of times, like, if we put in water main today, the ductile iron pipe is cement lined, so it reduces the amount of buildup on the inside of it. The older cast iron mains are not lined. And over time, despite our efforts through flushing, there's buildup that occurs and reduces flow. So they've provided us an asset management list, where they've prioritized those pipes that should be replaced. There's some really big projects there, and they're on really critical infrastructure, like the 16-inch transmission mains from the plant to town. We've divided those projects up as best as we can to, take into consideration the impact to this plan, but try to replace those as close to the recommended schedule that Dufresne gave us as we can. The sewer main projects are a lot smaller, and oftentimes that's because those are easier for our crews to do ourselves. And, we're constantly inspecting lines. A lot of times you find those are smaller sections, and our crews can take care of those. And as I mentioned, the hydraulic analysis isn't done yet. So there's a chance that there's going to be other projects that come up, but they're not going to be at the scale that these are. They're going to be smaller infrastructure assets throughout, within the system, but they're not going to have price tags like these do. So I guess that's kind of the high level without going through each line individually.
Thanks. Great. Who's next?
Shall we start with questions there? We've got a budget and we've got a list of capital projects.
Sure, why not? Questions from Brattleboro Select. These are Steve fellows. I got a couple. All right, so the deficit, you spoke to that and spoke to why we should perhaps not be so concerned. So this was a grant that we applied for and received later than we thought we would. But we have received that money.
Yes.
So where does it show up?
It would show up in a current year, in a fiscal 24 year to date, which is nowhere in any of this documentation. So that would show up more in the financial statements provided by the finance director in the finance report.
Okay, so follow up to that. Does the fiscal year 24 utilities budget show that it's like $400,000 better than expected because of that, or?
We don't do budget adjustments mid-year, so no, we wouldn't show that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't happen to have that in front of me.
Okay. It just kind of struck me as sort of strange that money has been received, but sort of is it kind of invisible to us a little bit? And,
so when you're looking at a budget to budget comparison, which is essentially what's being presented, yeah, you would not necessarily notice if there was in the fiscal 24, if there was an actual additional revenue, you wouldn't see it there.
Yeah.
You'll see it at the close of the fiscal year when that fund is audited.
good. Will it show up in the cash reconciliation that we'll go through momentarily?
It won't.
Okay, all right, interesting. I wish I had 400,000 that I was like this. Okay, that is my one big question. No, that's part A of my big question. Part B is about cash reconciliation, and so I will wait on that. Other board members have questions maybe about the budget side of things, then maybe we can separate out the capital questions.
I have questions and I don't know where they fall in your.
Are they about money or capital?
They've all got dollars attached to them, so in that sense, they're about money.
About capital.
Are they about, well, some of them are about capital expenses that, I mean, I don't quite get how, OpenGov spotted this massive need for new capital. You know, I mean, that happened through this hydraulic data that made you aware of problems that you had previously been unaware of. And, you know, I'm sort of struggling with the increases in expenses we need and how they came around and how that interacts with OpenGov, which seems to be the way that these increased expenses were identified. And then also the cash reconciliation when a year ago.
We haven't quite done the cash reconciliation.
Yeah, so I'm just saying where it all fits together for me is, you know, a year ago, we were told we could lower rates and now we're told we need to raise rates. And I'm having trouble drawing all this information into a really systematized understanding in my own brain. I just may need to spend more time with the spreadsheets to see how all these different pieces fit together.
Perhaps you could speak to the OpenGov and the capital piece, and we can come back to that cash reconciliation of rates because we haven't quite done that bit of the presentation yet.
No OpenGov, they're not involved. So this was this planning grant. We hired Dufresne Group as the consultant to do the hydraulic analysis. They're the ones performing it. And it was identified through the flow data. Why wasn't it previously identified? I don't think we had, that's why we did the planning study, right? We hadn't done such a thing. We know there's areas that are old. We know that, you know, there's areas that are higher risk than others, but this really kind of is the first time that we prioritize them systematically and put numbers to them.
Okay.
So a year ago, what were you using to plan your capital expenditures? I mean, how were you going about deciding, you know, what the next several years held in store? Without having this hydraulic study done, or, you know, what do you normally do? You don't want to have a hydraulic study done every year, probably.
So we actually maintained a list that if you look at the two lists, there's a lot of overlap between the two. Our prices weren't even close because there's been such a drastic increase in cost. And so this is new data that took in today's costs and then projects out what the increases will be. You know, the cost of ductile iron pipe has just skyrocketed in the last couple of years. And, you know, a lot of this is large diameter. You know, so I mean, I think it wasn't that they weren't on the map at all.
So you basically updated what needs to be done and what it's going to cost, and it came out to quite a significant increase in capital expenses.
$18 million.
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, and so this really good work that Dan and Pete have been doing to get an understanding of the condition of our assets is what will feed into OpenGov, and then we'll be able to keep up with that better moving, like projecting out into the future. So that's the tie-in with the asset management system.
Great, thank you. This is maybe a naive question, but I'll just ask it anyway. So you're talking about this hydraulic analysis, looking at flow data. And you described the older pipes as, you know, buildup forming and they're reducing flow. What are the problems associated with that? You know, obviously less water is moving through the system. Is that dangerous? Is it more likely to lead to breakages? Are there health and safety impacts?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, some of it's age. So there's two transmission mains that come from the reservoir. The new main is 1952. The old main is like early 1900s. So, you know, there's a demand to town. There's a max demand that if everyone turns their water on and there's 3 fires at the same time that we need to provide. And, you know, that's where the flow comes into place. None of these are regulatory concerns. You know, they're kind of just like, let's get them on the map. We need to start thinking about it. We're not in a position where we have problems, but also you get that buildup in there and that's just more pockets for it to be.
Great. Well, not great, but thank you for the answer. Other board members' questions? Elizabeth?
Good evening again. So Just one little pesky question to begin. This $75,000 for a rate study. The state has been so generous with us in every aspect of water supply. Would there be a grant to apply for to have a rate study done? Is that something that other towns want, and there might be a program of the state for that?
There could be. I've reached out to a couple different agencies that may be able to help us. As Patrick mentioned, it was kind of a last minute addition and we wanted to put something to it. And I think that's a good idea what it could cost us. Maybe there is an opportunity to save money there.
Great. And so what I'm hearing now is that you all, I guess Dufresne or yourselves, have calibrated essentially a new financial model of your need based on current supply chain issues. And so that's where the demand for a rate increase is coming from. And we on the select board have in numerous years really worked with you and tried to struggle to understand the decision-making of, you know, are we charging too much? Are we charging too little? And that rate discussion. So where we are now, I think last year we chose to be a little bit under and see where that would take us. And so now we're hearing that we really should up the ante because we've created a deficit for ourselves and your financial model is greater than previous estimates. Is all that correct?
And I would say that we still haven't actually had that.
And we haven't had that discussion, but overall, that's why you're here. And that's the decision that we will be making, not tonight, but you're laying the groundwork now for us to understand so that we can make that decision. Do I have it right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Richard, Peter, questions about this aspect of the presentation? We have a question from a member of the public. Mr. Levenbach.
Thank you, David Levenbach, District 9. A question and an observation about the allocation of expenses from the utility fund to the general fund. What kinds of savings are we looking at then in the general fund? And then the observation is that may be small, but it could be increased substantially with your decision about rates. There's probably going to be some cost shifting from homeowners to renters in this proposal. Thank you.
Patrick?
Yes, sir.
Not true.
Oh. I believe you were kind of interrogated, or John was interrogated, or perhaps Dan or Pete.
As to the reduction in the cost of liability insurance in the general fund, offhand, I don't recall.
And the cost shifting from homeowners to renters, accurate or no?
What is that even?
Well, let's see. I would say so.
It's about 50-50.
Mr. Levenbach's analysis, I think renters pay water bills, right? Some renters have water included in their rent, others do not. Property owners pay property tax. Some will say renters pay property tax via their rent payment. So exactly how that sugars out between renters and landlords is difficult to say.
Thank you.
It would be a shift between the property tax and your utility bills for sure. But since there's no clear separation between landlords and tenants on who pays property tax and who pays utility bills, I don't think you can generalize from the property tax utility bill difference to who's paying those differences.
Great. Thank you. John?
On the liability insurance, so the utility's been paying about 55, 59, $60,000 in liability insurance, but when we recalculated the cost of that based on the value of the assets, it's now projected to go up to 237,000. So the difference there is the benefit to the general fund.
And the increase in liability insurance because of these assets is the assets increase liability?
Yes.
So I forget the exact methodology that we used to do it on. I think it was based on budget or something, percentage of budget, but now it's based on the value of the assets that are at risk. So the general fund owns much fewer assets than the utility fund. So the insurance to protect those
much less costly assets.
Much less costly assets. So the insurance to cover them is now equated better with the proportional value of the assets.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So in the past, the general fund was carrying, the taxpayers were carrying some of the costs of the utility. Now they no longer do that.
Great. Are we ready to move on to the second part of the presentation? Looks like we are.
Sure. Excellent. So this is the cash reconciliation, as you point out, and it will lead to a discussion about rates. Every year that I have delivered this message, I've also pointed out that the utility fund is managed as an enterprise fund, meaning it's intended to be managed as a business. Because of that, there is a different accounting methodology employed, different than we typically use in the general fund. The general fund operates almost on a cash basis. This is the revenues that come in. These are expenses that go out. It's fairly straightforward, fairly easy to see. In the utility fund, we use what's called full accrual accounting, and that complicates matters in a way that, frankly, I'm not always the best to describe, but I'll do my best. What it means is that you include in your budgets things like depreciation, even though we don't need to cut a check to anybody for depreciation. It means that when we get a bond, the interest payment is actually included in the operating budget, but not the principal payment. That comes off the balance sheet. So there are a whole range of accounting regulations that define how you account for a business utility like the utility fund. And the purpose of this sheet here, the cash reconciliation, is to work our way backwards so that we can get to a clear understanding of what are the impact of our activities on the cash in the fund. And so I would draw your attention really kind of to the lower third of this page. And
Page is that?
Page 95?
that would be page 98. Certainly it's 98 in my book. Utility
like this, Patrick?
reconciliation?
Yes, that's it.
It says 95 at the top of mine.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, it says 98 at the top of mine. That's strange.
95 or 90?
Well, we're looking at two different things.
It's
here, so
95.
let's literally get on the same page.
It's 95 of 128 and 98 of 131. I don't know why.
Oh,
Different.
interesting. Version 1, version 2.
Interesting.
Yeah. But we're looking at a thing that says utility fund cash reconciliation at the top, and there are 4 columns.
Excellent. So I would draw your attention down to the bottom. In the section called unallocated cash balance, you'll notice that there is a beginning balance and an ending balance. And what's truly important, what's really key to what's going on here is that these numbers tie back directly to our financial software and tie back directly to our account statements at the bank. So the beginning balance of 553 in fiscal year 23, that's an audited number. It ties directly back to the available cash at that time.
Where are you looking? I'm sorry, you lost me.
Unallocated cash balance in fiscal year
Right.
23 beginning balance.
The fifth
Okay,
table
got
down.
it.
Yep. And then we can see the impact of cash reconciliation, the adjustment for various accruals. We find ourselves with an ending balance of 6.940, right? That also ties directly back to our accounting software and can be reconciled directly to our bank statements. So the really key thing here is that there's a starting balance, there's the activities, and there's the ending balance. But there's one more really key thing, and Dan mentioned it early on in his presentation. We have a rolling carry forward of funded capital projects that are just not complete. So while at the end of fiscal 23, there was 6.9 million, 3.7 of it was assigned to a particular project. Not one project, a whole series of projects. So then we drop all the way down to the bottom and we see our unallocated cash on hand is $3.23 million. So while you can tie directly back to the bank statements that we had 6.9, knowing that we've got 3.7 earmarked for various capital projects, what that means is we've got 3.2 that isn't particularly assigned to any one thing. It's not, you know, for this capital project or for that capital project. It's, shall we say, our reserve. And what's important about the reserve in the utility fund is when problems occur, they're expensive. They can be very expensive. And there's really no room for error. This is the potable water for the town and all of its residents and everyone who visits here and all of the various businesses that make use of that water in doing what they do. And so staff have always believed we need to retain a certain amount of unallocated cash in the event that a problem arises. The middle column, that's fiscal 24. That's our current year. We can see that the ending balance from fiscal 23 is exactly the starting balance of fiscal 24. Fiscal 24 is not over. So everything after this becomes a little bit less certain. But we know we've got a growing capital carryover that's risen from 3.7 million to 4.2 million. But we see at the bottom, at the very bottom, we're anticipating our unallocated cash to actually rise by the end of the fiscal year. What we're talking about tonight is the fiscal 25 budget. That's the one, that's the column on the right. And what we see is if we proceed as the budget indicates in accordance with our current rate ordinance, we can envision completing fiscal year 25 with approximately $3 million worth of unallocated cash. That's not a bad place to be, but what we want to talk a little bit about what comes next, what comes in the years beyond that, beyond fiscal 25, out past fiscal 2030. And so for that reason, in the memo, staff have put forward a couple of different options. One of which is to proceed. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Why is there no sum listed for capital carryover in 2025?
Just because we haven't gotten there yet. Though that particular line in that column is always empty.
Because in theory, that carryover for 24 is the total of all of those capital projects, and in theory, they could all get attended to.
We hope that it's
Exactly.
zero.
Yeah.
We plan for them all to be completed.
Yeah.
They won't.
But they won't be.
They likely won't,
Yeah.
but at what point will they be completed?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Got it.
So we assume that
But
in fiscal 25, all of the capital projects initiated in fiscal 25 will get completed and all of the carryover will be completed as well.
so in the previous 2 years, the capital carryover essentially cut the ending balance in half.
Yep.
And so in this year, we don't know, and we're just assuming that there'll be no essential subtraction from the ending balance. But if there was capital carryover, we could potentially be in hot water.
No, because it would be added into that.
Yeah.
It would be added into the ending balance?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it'd make the 3 point.
It's offset.
okay.
Okay.
All right, carry on.
I love this budget. I like that this budget comes at the same meeting where we talk about how all these fiscal controls, and one of the fiscal controls is like how educated the select board are on like budgets and so forth. And maybe we should take a utility fund class.
Any line items you want to?
No, it's a really challenging budget to understand, and I appreciate you walking us through it, and we will have more questions, I am sure.
It is a very difficult budget to work through. Actually, the budget is a piece of cake. It's this reconciliation and the rates, which are fundamentally a little bit more complicated. And it's really one of the reasons, in light of the new capital projects and their value and the impact that we see, I think it might be time to update the process and bring in a little technical expertise, at least next year.
Great, thanks.
So
where were we?
in the memo, going back to what is page 95 of 131, is the beginning of a couple of options that staff have considered in terms of what we do with utility rates. The budget, as you know, was constructed with 1% increase in water and sewer rates. Yes.
So we're now transitioning back to the memo, moving away from the table, and it's actually page 92, and you're going to walk us through the options.
Yep. The question really for the board to consider as you are considering rates is how much cash should we be keeping on hand in the event of an emergency? We had a discussion about this at some length last year, and staff at that time made a really strong recommendation that we should keep $2 million set aside for emergencies, and that we should keep 3 months operating. That last year added up to $3.6 million. For fiscal 25, that would add up to $3.7 million. As we began to take a look at the future years unallocated cash in light of two things, in light of increased operating expenses, think of the sludge, think of the liability insurance, et cetera. Those things are not likely to go down in future years. They're going to stay right there. So our operating expenses over time are going up. And in addition to that, we've now been better informed about significant capital projects that we belong setting aside some funding for. So we've been taking a look at, all right, what do we need to do in order to prepare for these changes, right? New information yields potentially a new path forward. And that has led staff to really have a close conversation about, all right, so do we really need to keep $3.6, $3.7 million around? Because the rate increases necessary to sustain that in light of this new information are pretty extreme. And then actually, I think it was Dan who pointed out, you know, in a real pinch, in a real emergency, if a plane crashed into a giant water tank and suddenly we had a big problem, that capital carryover could be utilized in an emergency. And so keeping around several additional $1 million on top of what is several $1 million on hand might be asking too much. And so as the board considers, we think it's okay that we drop down below that 3.6, 3.7 million. And so we provided some options, right? The first option is to carry forward and to finish out the existing rate ordinance, which is just for fiscal 25. And it is based on 1% increases, just as the budget has been presented to you this evening. You can see that over time, it doesn't take too long before the unallocated cash in the fund begins to drop and drop fairly precipitously. Next year, it goes to 2.6, then it's down to 1.8, then it's down to 1.3, 72,000 or 721,000, and so on. We think it makes sense for the board to be considering a 5% increase for the years 26 through 30. The real question that we've been pondering is, should we be jumping on this sooner and getting to it in fiscal 25? And so that makes up the second option.
Can I just stop you there for a second, Patrick?
Yes.
So option one in the memo has 1% for FY25.
Yep.
And then it shows 5% for 26 through 30, but with really dwindling unallocated cash, and that just can't be right. Surely those numbers are just 1% increases each year, because that's kind of what the memo is describing, but the table shows something different.
So the table, we put in 5% each year. The 1% is only for fiscal 25. And with the additional operating expenses and with the additional capital investments required, what we're showing is that a 5% in each of those years is going to lead to a dwindling cash balance in the utility fund. And that's a problem. And that's why staff isn't recommending option one.
Okay.
Okay. Option two.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
That's an effect of compounding. It must be. It's that you lose the compounding from the first year in all the subsequent years. Because if, just from a straight arithmetic standpoint, you're seeing these huge drops year after year after year, even though there's a 5% increase in all those years. And therefore, the only place that drop can be coming from is the missing 4% in FY25. I mean, to me, it's a very surprising arithmetic result. But if it's correct, it's just got to come from the fact that we didn't get that 4% in year one, and the effect of that is being felt out in subsequent years.
Absolutely.
But mathematically, I'm really surprised that the magnitude continues to be that large year after year after year.
As am I, and I would like it to be double checked. Please.
I think it is, as you described, the value of money over time. And by accepting a rate increase sooner, there's a substantial impact to the cash balance in the utility fund.
Great.
Why you're supposed to start saving for retirement while you're young.
Yes,
But still, this is a very large effect.
So Patrick, you were about to present option two before I interrupted.
Yeah,
you.
option two carries forward with the 5% increases from fiscal years 26 to 30. However, it starts a 5% increase in fiscal year 25. And what you can see is a far more reasonable cash balance maintained over the life of that term within the fund balance. The third option that staff provides is, all right, if we wanted to go ahead and try and maintain that 3.7 million, what would that take? And we feel by plugging 6% in through each of the years from fiscal 25 to fiscal 30, you come fairly close to that. But we don't necessarily see that as the recommended course of action. The course of action that we would recommend would be to have the board consider a 5% rate increase in fiscal 25. And then in each of the following years, we'd like for this to be confirmed by a technical expert, which is why we've included that $75,000 into the project. But we believe a 5% rate increase at this time is called for. And the reason for it is not that we made a mistake last year. The reason for it is twofold: increased operating costs that we don't see going away. And secondly, additional capital projects that we do believe we need to undertake.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
Yes, sir.
Anything further presentation wise? No? Okay. Board, questions about this? Hefty bit of work here. Thank you. Franz?
Yeah, I've got on my iPad screen here the material we were presented with a year ago and setting rates at that time. And I'm having trouble figuring out why the unallocated cash on hand, this in today's numbers is so different from what was projected a year ago. I'm looking at, for the FY 24 budget, it was projected presumably at the end of FY 24.
Uh-oh. I think I actually have it written down on my piece of paper, much more reliable than
Analog.
the.
I still got it. I got it back. I touched the wrong part of the screen. So anyway, we were supposed to have, unallocated cash on hand, presumably at the end of FY 24 of $4.383 million.
Mhm.
And what we've actually got, is some other number that's not
3.9.
as big. What is it?
3.9.
Yeah, so there's like $400,000 or something missing in terms of unallocated cash on hand from what was projected for FY 24, from what is actually gonna be there at the end of FY 24. So I mean, that's kind of my starting point of confusion.
John.
Yeah, and I think I looked into that a little bit, and I think it's a couple things. One is the OpenGov purchase was partly paid for out of the utility fund last year before we closed on fiscal 23. And partly was the delayed grant receipts that Patrick was talking about before. I think that added up to something over $1 million. And that's the difference that we see between the projection that was in the memo from June 2023 to what we're working with now.
So if that, okay, I get it with the OpenGov, but if the money that we didn't receive in a timely fashion will show up in the FY 25 budget. So then in our FY 25 projections, in the new numbers, we should see a bump from that.
And that was what Patrick was explaining before, that we don't really see it in the FY 25. We'll see it in the FY 24 at the end of the year. And those numbers will get updated at that point.
Which is why you're asking us not to worry about that deficit in this budget? Yeah?
That's
or
why
no?
I'm saying that, there isn't currently a reason to panic because we're aware that there's an additional $440,000 that is gonna, that is arriving in fiscal 24 that wasn't budgeted for in fiscal 24.
But that's
Okay.
got to turn into unallocated cash on
Hello.
hand at some point, right?
At the conclusion of fiscal 24, it will have an impact.
So the way,
Sorry.
Thank you. John.
yeah, so when the audit is done at the end of fiscal 24, that's when that will show up.
Right.
Right now, it's kind of just in the accounts, but it's not on the books yet.
So if we come back to this data, Daniel,
Hi.
in a couple of months, it'll look different in these options. The unallocated cash on hand numbers will look substantially different. I mean, they've got to somehow.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. When we were crafting fiscal 24, fiscal 23 wasn't even done yet. So, and as we today are looking at crafting fiscal 25, fiscal 24 is not done yet. So, these numbers are not,
They're not
They're
audited and
projections.
reconciled.
they're projections, thank you. They're projections. They're not yet audited, completed fiscal years. What I can show you is the column on the left, if you're looking at the cash reconciliation, that's audited.
The FY
Everything that
23.
moves forward from that has a certain degree of projection variability, and more so in the far right column than in the middle column.
Do other board members have questions?
So
Richard.
so it seems to me like with the 5% option, at least you can say to taxpayers, okay, you're taking a hit for right now, but we can tell you up until 2030, we're gonna stay that way.
Staff would propose at this, John?
That's our projection, but one of the reasons that we're proposing to do this rate study is because we don't totally understand yet the implications of the capital needs going out in future years. So I would just hedge on that a little bit, like, this is our best guess given what we know right now, but that could change.
Okay, so the expert would help clarify that.
Exactly.
Peter?
Dan, anything?
And there might be different ways that they propose looking at the rates too. You know, we've always had a water and sewer rate that is the same for everybody,
Mhm,
you know, but maybe there's a different rate structure that we could consider as well.
mhm. Peter?
I mean, I'm not sure how, like, the projection things, I mean, things happen all the time, right? I mean, I have well water that feeds into town sewer. I win, right? I mean, in this scenario, but,
Until you need a new well.
to my point, my well went unexpected. No reason to think that it was gonna fail, and it failed. So if I could have figured out how to just sort of gradually take that, as opposed to scrolling out one big check and sweating while I did it.
You could have connected to the water main.
Well, now you'll budget for the cost of that
Damn.
replacement well in like 20, 30 years
Well,
time, maybe.
It has a 10-year guarantee on it, so I got a little
All right,
time, but
10 years.
I'm just saying, so, you know, I get, this is a little bit of shadow boxing here, but kind of stabilizing that as best we can seems like a really good option, though.
Right. So we revisit this every year and we do a rate ordinance that is for 5 years, but it has been our tendency to like take a look in every single year and consider adjusting if appropriate. And so these 5-year ordinances, I mean, it's technically a 5-year ordinance, but we take a look every year. And, you know, last year,
Yeah, but I don't mind that.
I don't mind it either. I guess I just wish that we had a little more confidence in the future.
Well,
I
I
guess
think
that's
that
where
the
this
the
study-
plan for the study is
Yeah.
to have that confidence.
Yeah. My other concern is that operating costs continue to increase, material costs continue to increase. So we are calculating this 3.6 million. I mean, last year it was what, 3.4 million that we thought we needed to keep to one side? It was a different number. It was a
3.6.
slightly smaller number than this year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I would assume that will be true next year and the year after that. So that number that we will need to keep in reserve will continue to increase as well. So these projections for 5 years here are kind of expecting that we'll need to keep the amount in reserve that is the same as today, and that's not the case. Most likely. Future select boards will revisit this work and will look back on their predecessors and say how foolish they were.
Oh, no, no,
Just
no.
like we were saying about ourselves last year.
How prudent we are
Yes.
to have this rate study.
And we should be prudent and we should make sure that we have sufficient funds on hand to take care of any terrible events, because it is important that the town's water system is protected.
Mhm.
Questions, further comments, Mr. Potter?
Just a question, Daniel. So as far as the board is concerned, like the big thing we need to walk away from this meeting understanding is your level of interest in one of these options so that we can prepare the correct materials for considering this at your next meeting.
Okay, well, I didn't hear a lot of clamoring for 1% for the next 5 years.
I'm an option 2 kind of person.
Uh-huh.
Can I ask one quick question? I mean,
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, there's a 1% increase in option 3. Does that mitigate any of these concerns here if we were to consider a 6% increase? Does it, I mean, obviously.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
You're saying there's a 1% increase on top of the 5%.
Right.
The 6%.
Well, that option 3, right?
Mhm.
Is that what?
Yeah.
If I'm reading that correctly.
Option 3 is 6% all the
Yes.
way.
That is option 3.
So that would be budgeting out and I don't know, maybe mitigating some big break in a line somewhere.
Yeah.
You know.
Elizabeth.
But I don't see the need for that projection before the rate study.
That's a good point. It's fair.
So it sounds like option 2 and option 3 are sort of on the table, with a slight preference for option 2. Dr. Reichman?
Sure, but I really need to have somebody walk me through the calculations on option 1.
Good.
You know, that mathematical results is just so surprising to me. I thought maybe I could do it with my very smartphone, but I can't.
And if we could get that calculation shared with the rest of the board, I think that would at least set our mind at ease. I mean, nobody's shouting for option 1 anyway. So could you bring back option 2 and option 3? No?
Is anyone interested in option 3?
Richard, I haven't heard from you. What do you think?
Option 2 seems reasonable.
Option 2 is reasonable.
I think then
Seeing
we've got
a couple of head nods on
people
option.
nodding on that,
Yeah.
so why make the extra work?
Let's bring option 2 back.
Why don't you, good call,
Sounds
for
great.
chair.
And also let's see the math on option 1 because that is. Matt, want to hear from the public, John? I forgot they were there. We've been so deep in this. Public in the room? No. Public on Zoom?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
I want to kind of note that it's 9:10 and I'm not, well, it's not 9:10, it's 9:13. I'm not mad about it. I think whoever wrote this agenda was a little hopeful that we would adjourn at 8:05. I thought this would need an hour and it's needed about an hour and 4 minutes.
What do you mean by whoever wrote this?
So, board, sounds like we've given some direction. We'll come back with a utility budget to adopt,
Yes.
right?
And an ordinance.
And an
First reading.
and a rate ordinance, first reading, okay. And other than that, we only have one motion left this
I'll
evening.
do it.
Peter,
I motion to adjourn.
Peter has made a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you, BCTV, town staff, people of Brattleboro, interpreters. Good evening.